President Herzog, it is an honor to host you in our virtual home here at SAPIR, a journal that we began more than 4 years ago as a place where we could discuss, as we say, ideas for a thriving Jewish future. And in that time, we have produced 17 separate essays, 16 regular essays, and a special essay on war. And our latest, or excuse me, a special issue on war. And our latest issue, to which you have contributed an important essay, is our issue on diversity. Those of you who have only experienced SAPIR as a digital product, this is the beautiful physical edition of SAPIR. And I'd like to take the next few minutes to discuss what you wrote for us, and to have the opportunity to give some of our audience members at least a few minutes to ask you questions. This conversation is going to be about your essay. It's not about current politics in Israel. There's plenty of conversation in other spaces about that. But you have written an essay under the intriguing headline, Zionism as a Method of Diversity. And this has really been a key to your, really all of your presidency over four of maybe the most difficult and extraordinary years in the state of Israel, at least since the years of its founding. So I want to get right to it, Mr. President. There's a line in your essay that I would like you, if you may, if you can, to unpack for our readers. And you say, Zionism was and remains a structural container for Jewish diversity. Walk us through what you mean by a structural container, how Zionism plays that role for the Jews, both within Israel and, of course, among Jews outside of Israel.
Okay, so first of all, it's a great honor and pleasure to be with you, Bret, and the entire team of SAPIR. SAPIR is a very distinguished journal, which I think adds tremendously to the dialogue within the Jewish people and brings new themes. I'm a freak reader, and I want to thank everybody for contributing such wonderful thoughts and materials. And therefore, I was happy and honored to publish this essay of mine in SAPIR on diversity. And why diversity? Because this is something that I felt from day one as president. Of course, I'm in public life in Israel for decades, and I'm in public life in the Jewish world for decades. But you know, as from where I sit, from the helm of my seat, I see an evolution in Israeli society which is not understood abroad at all. And because of that, you have opinion makers that are totally detached from understanding the real inherent reality of the state of Israel and its undercurrents. And of course, I then compare it to the Jewish world, and I say Zionism was a container for a variety of lifestyles and beliefs of Jews, but they came here to build the Jewish homeland with all of its diversity. And that is the greatness of Zionism. If you start kicking out certain groups or thoughts, etc., you undermine the whole notion that Zionism is blind to various groups and sees everybody has the full right to be here. Now, I will add further, because in the essay, in the article, I describe three scenes which I've had in the last year during the war. And I'll just go quickly over them. One is the Shiva call for Major Yitzhar Hoffman, a hero of Israel, a household name by now. He was a commander in an elite unit. He was a reservist. He was one of the builders of our National Library, an engineer. Incredible guy, and who grew up in a settlement in Ofra, which is one of the biggest settlements in the West Bank. So he's Zionist religious. And he then moved with his wife and lived with his wife and kids in a secular, non-secular village up north called Eshchar, which is shared by an Arab village called Arab El Naim, meaning all lifestyles possible in one little community where Yitzhak Hoffman was. Now, the natural stereotype would be a settler, right-winger, doesn't care for the Arabs, the Palestinians, etc. But what was his main pride, and recently somebody told me there's a video of his, he was proud that during the heat of battle, he stopped everything and went to save an elderly Palestinian woman who was all alone, and he walked her out of the battleground. And I say in conclusion, that's a complexity for all those stereotypical analysts who look at things in a very, very superficial way. And I move on to the second person. His name is Sharif Nijem. He's the mayor of a little town or regional council, local council called Jish, Gush Chalav. Jish is a village from ancient time where the oil and the woods to the temple were brought in from the Galilee. It's a Christian Arab town, and the mayor, and we are there on the border of Lebanon with sirens wailing. We're in the middle of the church having lunch, by the way, with Jews, Muslims, Druze, and Cherkessians, and all facets of Israelis. And I said to myself, I wish the entire national media could come and see the real Israel in this hall. And then I asked the mayor, Sharif, tell me, before you became mayor, what did you do? And he said, I am an expert in building mikvaot, okay, the ritual baths of Jews. And I know the difference between a Gera mikveh and a Lubavitcher mikveh. And I say to myself, here's another breaking the stereotype type Israeli. And finally, I go into the beginning of the school year of the Haredi community, the ultra-Orthodox community in Beit Shemesh, and in the heat of tension about the mobilization to the army. And the kids in the yeshiva, young kids, first they start praying for the soldiers and for the hostages. And what I'm trying to say is that it's not boilerplate. There's a huge overlap in our society and a constant evolution. And we are a very diverse society. And diversity in many ways impacts our lives, both in public life, in politics, but also in so many other facets of life. And that is why what I try to explain, Zionism is an evolutionary container of how society in the Jewish state develops. Sorry, you have to unmute, my dear Bret.
Mr. President, thank you for reminding me. Very quickly to our audience, we will have 10 minutes at the end of this talk for questions. So as questions occur to you in the audience, put them in the Q&A function below, and I'll select a few questions for President Herzog. I want to talk about this point because for I think many of us who look on at Israel with concern and worry and deep anxiety about its present, diversity has not always been seen as a source of strength. People talk about the various tribes of Israel, that their differences are increasingly sharp and possibly unreconcilable. There's a line in your essay where you say that there's a recognition that after so many fissures, the invisible binding narrative holding Israeli society together is beginning to fray. Now, how serious is your alarm on this point, and how does a society like Israel, with these very deep divisions, begin to repair some of those fissures?
Okay, so I want to explain something about my point of view. You can either look at the structure of the society in a doomsday approach, or say, look, there's a golden opportunity here and we have to ever evolve and develop. America was different when it was founded. America is different now from 1776, and so is Israel. So, and the issue is, of course, that those who love Israel and care for Israel do not always understand how it develops. I see a lot of positive elements in this development because I believe that this brings people to bubble together and to exchange views together and open their heads to one another. Those of you who live abroad are unaware of how it affects our lives. You know, we are in a major war. We are in a conflict, and yet think about it. You know, schools, campuses all over the country have, you know, people of all facets of life, all religions, all views, and thank God they're all quiet and working and learning together. Working places the same, and so many other places the same. And in the army, you know, I visit Muslim battalions, and I visit people of all facets of life in green uniform. And wherever I go, I see this multiculturalism, and I say to myself, first of all, it's a fact of life. So rather than crying out loud that it's not the society we dreamt of, this is the society we have, and we should be proud of it and see the incredible forces coming out of it, what I always call the hidden light. There's a hidden light in all of the sub-societies in Israel. Right now, I just come in from a poetry contest and a prize that is awarded by my wife in memory of the previous First Lady, Rivlin's wife, and it's a national poetry competition. And we had 300 young poets send their books. And one of the winners was an Ethiopian Jewish poet, young poet, a lady. And I say to myself, this is another great success of diversity. And you see it all the time. And rather than complaining, let's see it as an opportunity. So there is one school that says we are all tribes. It's true that we are different groups, and we have different lifestyles and different beliefs and different religions, but there's a huge overlap that people from outside do not or are not able to see. And that is why I'm trying to explain to everybody that it's a natural process, and let's try to live with it and do the best out of it, because you'll find incredible human beings in all of the communities.
Let me talk about some of the initiatives that you are taking in this respect, or ask you about them. Because one point that you make in your essay is that this understanding of the value of diversity in Israeli life isn't going to be fully realized unless you have what you call points of contact outside of our own echo chambers. So how
Very
do you
good point. Good point. Well taken. I agree with you.
It's your point. So I want to ask you about that, because it is, in fact, often difficult within Israel for people from the Haredi community to encounter in a deep and meaningful way people from other communities, Arab Israelis, to meet with their Jewish counterparts. I know this is somewhat stereotyped, but not entirely so. These are often communities that lead separate existences. So how do you create opportunities to break those molds, or is my idea of the way in which Israel works a little bit too stereotyped?
Okay, it's an excellent question, because first of all, people do live in their echo chambers, especially in younger ages. But then they have to go to the real life outside. If you go through the venue of higher education institutions, or medical field, or industry, or where else, you find others there. Yes, I can say that the Haredi community is slower in its inclusion, whilst though you find them more and more, especially you find women. Haredi women now are much more, you find them in many facets of life that you didn't see them before. But it is true that up to a certain age, they are not as such exposed. And yet, again, in all sub-societies, in all the communities, in all the groups in Israeli society, there are huge questions being asked. There are huge simmering from within. There's an explosion of ideas. It's just that we, from the outside, sometimes tend to be judgmental. We don't read their press. We don't read their websites. We don't know the arguments going on in their communities. And sometimes we're indifferent to the huge changes that they're going through. But there are huge changes that they're all going through. And that is why at the end there are overlapping points. Now, the issue of the army and the war is an issue which is the hottest potato of them all. Naturally, first of all, because the Arabs are exempt, and therefore how does a young Arab meet his counterparts? Usually in college, in university, or in the workplace. And there, of course, there has to be enough tools by the education system to enable him or her to be part and parcel of society. Remember that some of these groups, of course, are very conservative in the way they open up, and there are huge debates in this respect. But had you seen, but 20 years ago, you would not see a Druze woman serving in various posts in national service or being a top official. Today you see so much more, and the same goes for other communities. And secondly, in the Haredi community, the question of service, it's not that it's only one-sided, meaning only the non-Orthodox are the one demanding it, but there's also a big debate within the ultra-Orthodox community, which is kind of below the line, but we see more and more change in individual behavior by people who decide to join the service in various facets, not in huge numbers, but you know how evolutions develop. You start and you go on, and and it moves on all the time. So I see it in front of my eyes all the time in so many opportunities. And that is why I said I'm trying to tell the story of Israel right now. It's a diversified story.
We often think of communities like the ultra-Orthodox community or the Arab community in Israel as sort of the difficult, problematic communities for the state. But in some ways, some might argue that the old elite of Israel, the more secular side of Israel, also presents its unique challenges for the cohesiveness of Israeli society, not least in the fact that they're sometimes the most mobile Israelis, and people talk about the risk that some of this sort of more mobile class of Israelis may want to, at some point, abandon the state, go to California, go to New York, go to other
here,
places.
I'll tell you something, there are examples from nations all over the world that the elite left the nation under siege or battle, including in very modern history. This hasn't happened in Israel. On October 7th, everybody went back home. The elites, those who are touring, I don't know if to call them the elites, the young Israelis post-army who are touring all over the world, or people on campuses, or people who have businesses, or people who relocated, they all came back to fight. So I don't agree with that. I find incredible young Israelis of all facets of life looking for a sense of purpose. Even this morning, I met with a group of young Israelis from all facets of life, who decided simply to move down south, rent apartments, and move from Sderot to all the kibbutzim, just bring their own family there and move on. And that shows you there is a deep sense of loyalty and love and affection. What you see in the city square, the arguments and the demonstrations and the counter demonstrations and the arguments in the studios, it comes out of love of Israel. Each one thinks that his or her belief is the only one. Now, I agree with you that the aging secular elite feels a time with uncertainty and lack of trust as to how will the future look like. Because they were used to certain patterns of life, but things have changed. Things have changed because of numbers. We are 10 million people now in this country, and we are very, very, very diversified. Give you another example, the religiosity spectrum. When I grew up, you were either extremely secular or very religious. Now the spectrum is so diversified that people speak about it in the open. And in reality shows, you have people who say they're Orthodox, but they don't really adhere to all the mitzvot, to all the rites. And you have people who are totally secular, but in the way they behave, they are much more orthodox than the religious ones. And you see it all over. I can repeat examples all the time. So all I'm saying is that this molding of this huge combustion engine of a society under, under evolution is something interesting, thrilling, surprising. We have to accept it, and we have to talk amongst us. And that is why I founded my program, Time to Talk, Machlifim Milah, so that the diversity of Israel is under the canopy of the president's home, and we simply speak to each other in depth. And yes, there are differences, arguments, and there are sometimes major differences. But at the end, there's a desire by all to live together and move on together.
Mr. President, I want to turn to the diaspora communities. And there, of course, there's a great deal of Jewish diversity, variety. There's also here in the United States, within the Jewish community, a small but in many ways very significant question, especially for younger Jews in the US and perhaps Canada, about whether Zionism is the container for their idea of Judaism. And this is something that's very much talked about in the media, the Jewish media, especially here in the United States. Is there, in your view, a place for young Jews who don't see themselves as Zionists in this greater sort of fold of the Jewish world? And how should those of us who are Zionist diaspora Jews approach, talk to, interact with particularly younger Jews who feel profoundly alienated by the state of Israel for good reasons or bad?
Okay, so this is a very, very important question which loomed over our lives until October 7th. It's also post-October 7th, but I will just explain because I was heavily involved with this question before October 7th and before my presidency. And I say the following. Well, I'm very much aware of the fact that you have a big group of young Jews or Jews in general who basically feel unaffiliated, meaning they're Jewish, but they don't have a real affiliation of Judaism, or they are affiliated, they see themselves as Jewish, but alienated from Israel. And to them, I definitely extended a hand and said, I will have a dialogue with you anytime, since I have a dialogue with many of my opposers. But there is a red line, which means is the delegitimizing of Israel or boycotting Israel, because there I feel it is an onslaught accepting an anti-Semitic definition of the situation, meaning that Zionism is racism. This is something that runs very deep in my own DNA, because it was my late father, Chaim Herzog, who stood up in the UN General Assembly in November 75 and tore up a UN resolution equating Zionism with racism, which 15 years later was abolished. Now, post-October 7th, we know that there are many unaffiliated or many Jews who did not appreciate or respect where Israel is going to, and they had a wake-up call, because on campuses or in many other places, once you're Jewish, you're a Zionist, and I don't want to talk to you, and I attack you. And we know it. I had here a huge convoy of Jewish faculty from campuses all over the United States and the world, coming one after the other from the most lucrative institutions, telling me that they have gone through literal harassment for 15 years. They could not say a word again in favor of Israel. They would be banned, punished, unpromoted, not recognized as academics, because all they said was, we support Israel and we support the right of the Jewish people for self-determination. And I think this is a wake-up call also for those who didn't like where Israel is going. Once they come here, I tell everybody, come here, see for yourself. See for yourself, you may find even a sense of purpose. And since October 7th, I was inundated by many, many Jews who wrote to me, or I met, or we discussed this through meeting groups like the campus guys, that they were approached by Jews who said to them, you know, I'm what you call now an October 8th Jew.
Mr. President, we're going to take now some questions from
Please.
our audience. I think I'm going to give the first question to Ron Leibowitz. I suspect this is the Ron Leibowitz, the distinguished president emeritus of Middlebury
Brandeis University.
Brandeis University, and a wonderful friend of SAPIR. He asks, he says, you are very familiar with diaspora Jewry and American Jewry. The diversity of American Jewry is no more complex than Israeli society, as you have described it. What wisdom might you provide when it comes to a way to have the diversity of American Jewry serve as a unifier, as opposed to what we have seen, especially since October 7th? Good question, Ron.
So this is a home run on another initiative of mine called Voice of the People, which I launched just recently, a month ago. It's something I worked on since the beginning of my presidency, my term. And the idea was to gather a group of Jews from all facets of Judaism in the most diversified manner, focused more on younger people, what I call the Jewish People's Council, to meet for for a year or two, delve into the topics, come with new outputs and ideas that will serve the organized Jewish world. So we selected the participants by way of an algorithm. Of course, we established a nonprofit called Voice of the People with distinguished partners, foundations, and organizations. And we went through, thousands of people applied, and an algorithm selected the participants, the first cohort, which met in Haifa a month ago, and it was the most exhilarating experience because everybody who was there, also from people who know the Jewish world, saw different Jews that they've never met before. People not affiliated in the mainstream of the Jewish organizations, people from the outside, people who care and love, people of diversified Jewish backgrounds, the most diversified that, people did not realize that our Jewish brothers and sisters abroad have also evolutionized in a very impressive and interesting way. And the meetings were fantastic. And of course, it went from the most ultra-Orthodox to the most liberal and mixed backgrounds of Jews. And the results are fantastic. And this is why I say to Professor Leibowitz, we should see that as an advantage. And we should definitely open up and hug everybody under our canopy.
Felicia Herman asks, there are many philanthropists and Jewish leaders on this call. Very practically, how can we all work together with the state of Israel to do a better job of telling the story of Israel's diversity? The image of Israel outside of Israel is so flat, so monochromatic. What specifically should we do to change this?
So I love this term monochromatic, and Bret, that's for your next article, because it's true. It's like this, you have the old rhetoric about Israel, and people simply don't understand that this is a diversified society in the most fascinating way. And I think Alicia is right that you should, there are many, many platforms to deliver the story of Israel. I invite these platforms to simply delve into what I've said and see how to bring it out. All you need to see is the story of the hostages, or the story of the casualties we had on October 7th, because the untold story of about 40 Muslims who were slaughtered on October 7th, a mother of 9 who begged the terrorists not to shoot her, her husband is right near her, and they shot her 9 bullets, and he prayed the last prayer before she died, and he went to work in a kibbutz, okay, and he came, and he's as a proud Israeli to my home. These are the stories that need to be told as well, so that the world understand that we are fighting for the free world in this battle.
Sheila Zellinger says her understanding was that different groups in society are not being educated together. Arabs have their own schools, as do Haredis and others. Are there efforts to bring younger children together in school? And if so, what are they?
Yes, so for many years, there are many efforts, including efforts of exchange programs of schools. Not always it succeeds, it's true. We are built as communities, except in mixed towns and cities. There are mixed towns and cities like Akko or Lod or Haifa, and Jaffa, that there are mixed schools. Even under my, exchanging words or programs, we bring them together to meet each other.
Mr. President, I'm being told that we need to wrap on account of your time, so I am going to call this to an end. This is not sooner than a few minutes sooner than I'd like, but we are so privileged to have this chance to discuss your essay and to at least ask a few questions. The issue of diversity is in SAPIR, our current issue. We're proud to include you among our community of distinguished writers and our even more distinguished community of readers and supporters. So thank you very much for your time.
So I want to thank you and the editorial board and Maimonides Foundation. And I also want to say to all our viewers and listeners, I'm absolutely a believer in the destiny of our nation and in its moving forward. I know that there are many setbacks and challenges. There are many fears. I'm very much aware of it. Believe me, I'm in the heart of it. But I'm telling you that from within, from inside, I am much more optimistic, and I invite you all to learn and study and understand more. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Mr. President.